So as we just turn off the music, I'll point out a few things for your reference. In terms of fire escapes, you'll see there's fire escapes on all three sides. I believe the one on the side puts you into the kitchen, so I might recommend one of the back entrance or the side entrance there and follow the signage out of the building from there. In terms of washroom facilities, they're just down the hall and to the left, and you'll see them on the right-hand side near the small telephone area. To give you an idea of the events of today, you should all have a copy of the agenda in front of you. It's included with the Ontario One Call annual report, and part of that as well is the minutes of the last AGM, which we'll reference in a few moments as well. So as you see, there'll be a number of presentations today, some formal business that we'll take care of as part of our due diligence with the AGM. After the normal proceedings are done, there'll be a 15-minute break, and then we'll reconvene for the question and answer period, which should last about 1 hour or so. So let me pass it over to Scott Moody, our chair, and he'll start with the formal call to order.
Thanks, Ben. So I'd like to call the 2018 Ontario One Call Annual General Meeting to order. First of all, I'd like to welcome some of my fellow board members here. Of course, we have Karen Marner, Michael Fiorini, Kevin Green, Chris Hudson, right here, John Oakley, and Enrico Scalera. Thanks for attending, guys. So, on behalf of the Board of Directors and this wonderful first day of summer, I'd like to welcome everyone here to our annual general meeting. As a not-for-profit with an open model of governance, member engagement is an important part of our mandate. I am very pleased to see such a large cross-section of our membership here today. I also welcome our excavators, our LSPs, and stakeholder representatives, as well as an official from the Ontario Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. In the spirit of openness, there will be a plenary session after the formal AGM proceedings, where anyone may ask questions of myself, Executive Director Ben Hamilton, and Director of Operations Katie Godsman. Our first agenda item requiring approval is the minutes of last year's AGM. I believe they've been circulated. So, shall the minutes be approved? Those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, we will carry that. As there are no specific items in the minutes that were to be reported on at the next AGM today, we will proceed to the report from the chair. So as part of the Board of Directors' strategic planning work earlier this year, we took the opportunity to assess where we have been as an organization, and more importantly, where we want to go. Our mission is very clear: protecting your community from the loss of service and harm caused by damages to buried infrastructure. And our vision of how to go about that is crucial to understanding our direction. Members should view us as their premier partner enabling responsible excavation. We are an essential part of what you do on a daily basis, and our objective is to work every day to better facilitate safer excavation in Ontario. From a small entity with only a handful of staff, our organization now serves its members from offices in Guelph and Sudbury. This new structure demonstrates our commitment to delivering high-quality services to members, LSPs, and excavators, and also to continually look for ways to improve our value to you, the members. You will hear today about a number of initiatives that will improve the quality of our services and benefit damage prevention efforts in Ontario. To support this important work, the Board of Directors established strategic imperatives, which you'll find summarized in the annual report on your tables. Those imperatives include unlocking value for members through innovation. Excavators seeing Ontario One Call as reliable, firm, but fair. Government and stakeholders viewing Ontario One Call as open and listening. And the public sharing a universal commitment to call before you dig. Damage prevention is just not the responsibility of one organization. Each of our members is focused on creating an Ontario free of damages to buried infrastructure. LSPs provide high-quality locates so that excavators and their workers using the locate process can get home safely every day. Ontario One Call has an important relationship with the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. In 2017, we signed a new memorandum of understanding with the ministry and outlines our accountabilities over the next 5 years. At this meeting, we will be welcoming a new board member. He will join a talented group of continuing board members who have helped guide the direction of Ontario One Call over the last several years. Also, let me take this opportunity to thank outgoing directors who are not here today, Corinne Gabriel and Dan Moulton, for their years of service on the board. There is one goal we all share, and that's a safer Ontario. We see a province where members, LSPs, and excavators work together, where there are no damages to buried infrastructure, and where workers and the public can all go home safe. I am thankful for the work that each of you do to make that happen, and I appreciate your efforts in making and continuing to make Ontario one of the leading members of damage prevention in North America. Thank you very much. So now I'll pass it over to Ben Hamilton for his report.
Thank you very much, Scott. My name is Ben Hamilton. I'm the Executive Director of Ontario One Call. Of course, I know many of you from the day-to-day work of Ontario One Call. I see a lot of our members here, members I worked with starting back in 2014 or even earlier, and of course, many excavators as well who we've received a lot of feedback from and worked with as well through our client services group. So it's a good representation of our membership, of our excavators, of our stakeholders. I know the ministry is here as well as the TSSA, so you're all welcome. We're all very grateful to have you here today. My presentation, I'm just going to take a few minutes to summarize some of the activities from last year and look ahead to next year as well. And I just want to make sure that the information I provide to you is really timely and actionable information. That's always my goal. I want you to leave the AGM and any other One Call event with a good sense of some actions you'll take when you go back to the office and some ideas that you can use with your own organization. Just some general numbers off the start. 2017 was the first year we crossed 1 million 1 million excavation requests. So 1,041,610, which when you think of where we were just a few short years ago, there's been a lot of growth. And I think it's not only growth in the economy and economic activity and construction work, but also increasing awareness amongst the public to use call before you dig and the importance of calling before you dig. 0%, the fees frozen for 2018 at an absolute level. Many of you will know that we've cut fees over successive years by about 40% per notification. And last December, the membership decided to move to a new fee model, an assessment-based model, which will ensure that the revenues for Ontario One Call remain steady as we go through the process of implementing MSN. And as you'll hear throughout some of the presentations, MSN has been very effective in reducing the number of notifications our members receive. And that's a very positive thing. And one thing that makes it positive is that by bringing in assessment-based billing, we've ensured that the success of MSN wouldn't starve the organization of money and leave us in a deficit position where we have to go back to the membership and get more money. So in terms of the money we collect from members, we've been able to hold the line for 2018 after a number of years of reductions. And minus 10.9%, that's the decrease so far in the absolute number of notifications dispatched. And it's not relative to notifications per ticket. This is an absolute decline. And this comes in spite of the fact that the number of requests are higher than they were in, they're higher in 2018 than they were in 2017. So in a scenario of increasing demand for services, there's a decreasing number of locates that are being dispatched to our members. And when we think about the cost and benefit of that to the membership, ideally, and hopefully, these are requests that hopefully would be cleared in-house by a member. And hopefully very few of those actually went out for a painted locates, because that would not be a necessary step. So even at the lowest scale, clearing a locate can cost anywhere between $4 to $16. I've heard different numbers from different members based on how they do it themselves or how they utilize an LSP for that purpose. So when you're thinking about a over 10% reduction, we're almost talking about 1 million notifications per year. And when you multiply that by $4, it's $4 million up towards $16 million. So we'll probably focus a little more on those numbers, but even at the lowest amount, it's still an enormous amount of savings relative to the cost of running Ontario One Call. And it certainly is a significant amount of money when you consider the increasing resources that members have had to put into their locate efforts and their damage prevention efforts. Just to touch again on some of our 2017 priorities and the results achieved last year. MSN was certainly the biggest effort in terms of our member-facing activity. The launch was very successful. We were able to adopt some changes and feedback right away. Teldig, our technology partner, was also very helpful and supportive in that process, and it was a really good partnership throughout the last several months and last several years as we brought MSN forward to implementation. As we said, members are already seeing some very significant declines, and in a few minutes I'll talk about how we're tracking those declines and how we're going to share that information with you to make sure that you can understand where you stand in terms of MSN and also how that might impact your fees going forward. We've certainly improved our analytics that we provide to members, especially our largest members, in terms of their locate timeliness reports. That's an area where we've worked with the largest members, who comprise about 2/3 of the volume, to make sure that they get regular monthly updates in terms of where they stand and where their strong points and weak points are. We've opened our new office in Sudbury, which was a great success. We opened it last June, and we're very pleased to have another partner to help us with the volume of calls and the volume of work we receive. Sudbury is also very beneficial in terms of our contingency planning in case of any outage, and also does a great job in increasing our French language service capacity. We've been working several years on the abuse of emergency locates, and we're very pleased to say that emergency locate requests are down approximately 40% since 2015. That was a real area identified by members as an area of very significant abuse, and a lot of attention and discipline has been put towards that by our compliance staff, by our agents, and I have to give a lot of credit to the members and many excavators who have reviewed and changed their practices to make sure that only the genuine emergencies are getting through. We've talked about the move to assessment-based billing. The revenue requirement for this year is fixed at the same level as 2017, and that means the membership will again pay collectively $8.4 million into the One Call system. To give you some perspective, it was only 2 or 3 years ago members were paying more than $9 million into the system. So in an absolute dollar basis, members are paying less money into the system than they paid a couple of years ago. And there's not many organizations who can say that they do that. And of course, new policies and compliance members have been approved by the board and posted on our website. The new Memorandum of Understanding, which is a key part of our relationship with the government, was signed and will be in place for the next 5 years. I'll do a little question, a little audience participation on the next question. How many of you have seen the Ontario One Call ads, whether it be the television ad, maybe something on your website or your Google phone, some of the billboards we have up? So that's not quite everyone, but pretty close to everyone. The two commercials we have, the 15-second version and the 30-second version, are approaching 1 million views on YouTube alone. So we're getting a lot of eyeballs on our message, and we continue to drive the very simple message of call before you dig. We've developed an organizational scorecard that'll help us track some of the high-level metrics to show the success of the organization. You'll see some of that in the annual report that you all have in front of you. We've also updated our website, improved the access on the website, and held online education sessions to make sure that the compliance policies and our overall offerings to members are well understood. I'll give you some sneak peeks into the work that we're doing this year. Implementation of MSN is, of course, the paramount focus. It's gone very well so far, but we continue to work with members to improve and enhance their performance under MSN. A number of members made significant changes to their settings for MSN, in particular their mapping. Those members are seeing very significant benefits, very significant in terms of both the province overall and within their own industry. At the same time, a number of members have not been as aggressive or assertive in terms of reviewing and updating their settings. They're seeing below average benefits in terms of MSN. So part of our message today will be to encourage members to more closely engage with MSN, to review the possible benefits for its organization, and to enjoy the savings and efficiencies that come from that. Moving more excavators to web entry has been an ongoing process, and certainly we'll discuss, and Katie will discuss in her presentation, the benefits of moving towards web entry. We're working to develop a private property / single address ticket for 2019. We want to see if we can develop a parallel process that'll be more simplified for homeowners, for landscapers, for pool installations, for foundation repairs, things that are on private property and don't necessarily need the number or length of questions that the current ticket involves. And parallel to that, we can have another ticket, the current ticket, which talks about work in the public right-of-way, and which can include more detailed information and also a request to provide the permit number. As municipalities have told us many times, one of their challenges is that people are doing work in the right-of-way, have gone to Ontario One Call for locates, have done the proper thing, yet don't have a permit to do the excavation from the municipality. So that's a key request from municipalities that we can look at implementing through this process. Cost management and cost containment, we continue to take action to make sure that we take only the necessary funds from our membership. We have a very close relationship in terms of how we work together, and we really see ourselves as a partner and an extension of our members. And part of that is to make sure that we minimize the amount of money that we take to run the service properly. Improvements to the mapping, as we mentioned, that's an area where our member services team is really focusing on a number of members to upgrade their mapping. Continuing to work on emergency locate abuse. And on the governance and accountability side, stuff that the members and excavators don't necessarily see on a day-to-day basis. The board themselves have invested time in improving the board governance, to enhancing board and committee participation, and we'll hear from the operations committee a bit later on, and also working to ensure that the operations committee and staff are better connected with the membership and have more opportunities to hear from the membership and interact with the membership. And certainly this AGM and the plenary session is a key part of that, and so are our day-to-day interactions with members and our work with the committees as well. In terms of greater openness and transparency, we provide greater statistical information than before, and we'll want to keep on expanding that. The implementation of the organization-wide scorecard, which you'll see in the annual report, and also better financial projections for members in Q2 and Q3. This is a very regular request we've received over the last 6 months. members are asking us, how do we know where we stand in terms of MSN and in terms of future assessments from Ontario One Call? How do we know if our share of the pie is increasing or decreasing? How do we know if we're doing a good job relative to our peer group? So these are some of the reports that we're starting to produce, and these will all be dispatched to members at the end of Q2. So sometime in July, you'll receive this type of information about your own organization. So this is just an actual member from the telecom sector, and this gives them a good idea about where they stand. You can see that province-wide, we're down by 10.9%. This is the absolute number of notifications received. The sector, telecom, is above average in terms of its reduction notifications. So the peer group is actually down 13%. This member, however, is down 25%. So this member can look at their mapping and look at their system settings and say, our mapping and our settings have allowed us to maximize our savings under MSN, and we're doing better than our peer group and the province overall. So this is a very positive story on MSN. Not to say that there's not more mapping improvements that can be made, but this is overall a positive report, and one that would see the member paying less money into the system or having a smaller piece of the pie. This is a medium-sized municipality. This one's a little different. Again, you see the province-wide decrease of 10.9%. Municipalities have had a lot of success under MSN. They're down over 15% on average. And this member is down 8.7%. So the member just looking at their own number in isolation might think, we're down almost 10%, this is great, we'll pay less into the system, this should be fantastic. But in fact, they're actually slightly lower than the provincial average, which means there would actually be just a very, very slight increase in their assessment. So that member might want to look at that number and also look at its peer group and ask, well, what are some of the other municipalities doing that's led them to 15% or more? What are some of the attributes that we have as a member that might work against us or might work for us? So this report is really an invitation to look at their own system settings and to work with Ontario One Call to better understand where they are in terms of MSN. Katie, in her presentation, will touch upon some of the same themes, but the message I really want to leave you with is that MSN has worked very well so far, but as your partner in this exercise of reducing costs, helping you manage your workload, and ultimately implement damage reduction programs, we're going to be working with the membership to make sure that they maximize their benefits. So feel free to call us. We'll certainly be reaching out to you. And as you go back to your offices and back to your depots, be thinking about some of these questions and some of the ways that you can look at your own organization and see where there might be some low-hanging fruit. So that's my update as the Executive Director. I'll pass it on now to Karen Marner, our Treasurer, for the Treasurer's Report.
Thank you very much, Ben. Today, the Treasurer's Report will cover the audit report, the financial statements, and the notes to the financial statements found in your annual report on pages 15 through to 26. So please feel free to follow along. For 2017, our revenues were relatively flat at $8.45 million versus $8.39 million in 2016. You can see from the slide here that our revenues were actually higher in 2015, so we have remained relatively stable over the last 3 years. And as Ben mentioned before, we had frozen the fee schedule for 2018 just to ensure the predictability of a revenue stream to the operating of Ontario One Call. The implementation of map selection notification has provided significant benefits to our members, but also pose a risk of variability and uncertainty into the financial statements if we did not take the action to freeze our revenue fee schedule. In terms of our costs remain below our revenues. In 2017, our total expenses grew to $8.2 million, up from the $5.8 million in 2016. This is a fairly significant increase, which is reflective of the increased operating costs associated with the new contact center in Sudbury, as well as significant increases to the Guelph frontline staff to improve service levels. These changes have been well received by both excavators and members. With the opening of the new Sudbury office, there is an increase in the value of computer software, computer equipment, and furniture owned by the corporation. These amounts are tracked on page 23 of your report under property and equipment. Ontario One Call has worked with our external auditor to make sure these amounts are recorded properly at cost and have an appropriate amortization schedule to provide a annual tracking of our net book value. In terms of cash and current assets, our current assets were at $5.3 million at the end of 2017. Roughly $1 million was in accounts receivable from the membership, and $4.3 million was cash and cash equivalent. The board has continued to allocate $2 million of that amount for future system upgrades and $2 million to cover any operating variances. These provisions are in place to ensure that the corporation has sufficient flexibility to fund future system upgrades, as well as to account for any unforeseen variances in operating revenue. The board will continue to closely monitor these amounts as we progress through the major changes planned for 2018 and beyond. In terms of the current outlook for 2018, Ontario One Call is on track with its budget. The board continues to review our financial situation and looks for opportunities to mitigate members' costs. At the same time, we are committed to ensuring that the organization has the funds that it needs to successfully deliver on its important mandate. And I will move now to item 6 on your agenda. Shall there be a motion to approve Donna A. Golson, Chartered Accountant Professional Corporation, as the Ontario One Call Independent Auditor for the 2018 calendar year? Michael, thank you. Second? Enrico, thank you very much. Motion is carried. And with that, I'll take it over to Scott to do the election of the directors.
Okay, the process to select members of the Board of Directors is described in Ontario One Call's bylaw number 2, Article 12. It's a great read in case you'd like to see it. As required, Governance and Nominations Committee has received nominations for the open board positions and have prepared the following slate of directors. So I shall put the question to the entire membership. Shall the Board of Directors, as adopted, be proposed? Those in favor? Anyone opposed? None? Then that motion's carried. Great. All right, so now, Bev? All right, great. I am pleased to introduce Bev Mistry, who is our chair of the Operations Committee.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks, Scott. So my name is Bev Mistry. I'm with Hydro One. Let me just move this down a bit. So I'm the chair of the Operations Committee. I thought I'd start by introducing the Operations Committee. So if you could please stand as I call your name. So I'll start with John Huber from Enbridge Gas. So John represents the gas sector. Carrie Dudley Tatsu, I don't think she's here today, but she represents gas as well. And then we have Kevin DeCare from Electra, representing electrical as well. And then Stan Swan from Rogers, he represents telecom. I don't think Stan's here today. And we also have Sean Bissell from Bell. I'm not sure that Sean's here either. So he's also from telecom. Eric Bohr from Halton Region represents Municipal. And then we have Rick Rawlinson, who recently stepped down, and so we are looking for another seat for the municipal sector, so anyone who's interested, please do put your name forward. So reach out to myself or any of the members. And then we also have representing the excavator community, Andy Blocker from Avertex Utility Solutions, and Malcolm Robertson from Ontario Excavac. And lastly, we have 2 members representing LSP. We've got Scott Stewart from ProMark Telecom here today, Scott, and Jason Meyer from GTAL. I don't think Jason's here today. And lastly, the secretary, Katie Gottsman, who you'll hear from later on. So that's your committee. Your sector reps are meant to represent you and be a voice on the committee. So we do urge that you reach out to your sector reps and provide feedback, your concerns, pain points, because we really do want to hear from you, understand what it is that we can do to make things better for you. So I should have shown you that first. So I'll give some updates around the work that the committee's done in the latter part of 2017 and in 2018. So first, terms of reference. Given that we had a lot of new members join the committee last year, we thought it was a good time to actually look at the mission, vision, purpose of the committee. So we turned to the terms of reference, and it needed a bit of a refresh, and so we started with first looking at the membership and voting section. That was comprised of 10 members, 8 representing the member, Ontario One membership for sectors, and then 1 LSP, 1 excavator. So we increased the excavator and LSP membership, and so now we feel we have a more balanced committee with 33% representation that's not from Ontario One Call membership, but from other stakeholders. So we thought that was a good thing. The second thing we also looked at was the roles and responsibilities, and we tried to change the language so that it was a little bit more inclusive and speak to stakeholders more than just the members. And so we'll see language that speaks to additional roles of the committee that truly reflects the industry and also provides more of a voice that represents your sectors. So I thought those were 2 good changes that we made in the terms of reference. So next I'll touch on some of the initiatives that the committee worked on. So first is status visibility. So this was an initiative that started as a pilot last year, in which in the GTA area, utility or infrastructure owners were sharing the statuses of their tickets with other infrastructure owners. They found that to be very beneficial. By sharing this information, it allowed infrastructure owners, LSPs, to better respond to the statuses of tickets, so increased transparency. So based on the success of that pilot, we will be rolling that out this year to all members. So I think that you'll see a huge benefit from that. The next item I'll speak to is MSN, and I don't want to steal Katie's thunder. She'll be speaking to it quite extensively in her presentation, but MSN, as Ben mentioned, has had a huge benefit to all members with reduced notifications. And we have seen some challenges as well, which Ben also alluded to, and one of them being tickets that get funneled through the agent on the phone. Those tickets tend to, some tickets tend to see over notifications. So we've heard many members come forward with those types of issues. So we do encourage that you reach out to member services with those examples. Ontario One Call has been providing training and coaching to those agents to address those types of scenarios. So with MSN, we're also planning some improvements with the tools. So we're looking at adding a feature that allows you to drag and drop to better define your dig area. So the use of icons that represent posts or an auger or trees. So through that, you'll be able to define not just the work area, but more precisely the dig area. And so we'd expect that that would help decrease over-notification and increase efficiency overall. We're also looking at the feasibility of adding locate coordinates with the ticket, and so that would give better information for LSPs and infrastructure owners who are providing the locate, as well as data that can provide us better analytics. So next I'll speak to about the statuses in 360. So that was something that was added last year to improve communications between our stakeholders. So Ontario One Call, infrastructure owners, as well as the LSPs and excavators. And so by providing additional statuses, we're able to communicate more effectively. Some of the examples of statuses, for example, contact member. So that's a status that allows an infrastructure owner to indicate that they would like to be contacted or need to be contacted prior to a locate being executed. Another example is a status called cleared by lookup center. So that's fairly self-explanatory. It's it indicates that this ticket is good to go, that no locate is necessary because it's been cleared by a lookup center. So those are just some examples of statuses that were added. We also did some cleanup on existing statuses just to add clarity. The next item I'll speak to is improved compliance and complaint reporting, and that was requested by the committee. And so what we found was that we didn't have enough information to really effectively respond to complaints. And so by requesting or changing the scripting regarding the complaints, we're able to get more information that allows us to drive a faster turnaround on responding to the complaint. So that's been well received. So the next thing I'll speak to is about priorities. So locate priorities were discussed at length with the committee. The decision was made then to remove priorities 1 through 4. What we've left intact is emergency locates and priority 0. So emergency locates being, your 2-hour locate, and then priority 0 being a 24-hour. When we looked at the data for priorities 1 through 4, we saw that there wasn't a lot of volume, and so really not a huge impact by eliminating those priorities, and it just made the whole process a little less confusing for the excavator and the locator, as well as the agents on the phone taking the request. So the last 2 items I'll speak to are really the 2 major initiatives that the committee has chosen to focus on for 2018 and 19, with the goal of being efficient and effective. And so you may recall in May we had a consultation call that spoke to those 2 initiatives that allowed members to provide feedback. And so thank you for all those who participated and provided comments. We do look to you for feedback and so that we can incorporate that in our solutions. So the first one that I'll speak to is around service levels and defining what's reasonable. And so as we've seen the shift in tickets from fewer homeowner and simple projects to the more complex project tickets, we felt that there was a need, and Ben spoke to that as well, the need for a more simplified process for the single ticket homeowner type of locate. So what we're really looking at here is a number of things with this initiative, to take that project ticket and define it into more manageable segments that allows us to define a start and end date that we can action a little more timely and stay in front of the work, and so provide the locate as it's needed. So there's a lot of work to do in that area still. We're still in the definition and design phase of it. Thank you, Scott. And so we'll work to flesh out those details as we go along. So the second item or initiative is around prerequisites for locates. And so with this one, what we're really looking at is trying to define criteria that would establish that this is an actionable locate request. So while it would be great if everybody white-lined in the field, the reality is that people don't. And so the criteria that we've defined is essentially you either have white-lined, and you've indicated that in the locate request, or second, you've provided some design plans that indicate the dig area, not just the work area. And the third is that you virtual white-lined using MSN. So one of the things that we're looking at with MSN is to provide the drag and drop capability to further define that dig area. So that's something that we hope to have implemented later this fall. So when you combine that, it allows you to define what's a truly actionable locate request with that intent to actually excavate. So that wraps up the initiatives that we're focusing on for 2018 and 19. So hopefully my update gives you a flavor for what the committee does, and we do urge you to reach out to your sector reps to provide your feedback and suggestions, ideas, because really we are a committee that's representing the membership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bav. I just want to reinforce what Bav just mentioned. Know your reps, use them to, so that you can be heard. Participate when you can. It all adds to the richness of this organization and the process. And I really want to thank Bav for taking the lead on this ops committee in 2017. All the great work you've done. You've done an excellent job, and we really appreciate it. Thanks. Okay, Katie, you're up.
Good morning. Okay, there are a lot more of you than I thought. So I hope I don't bore you today because a lot of it's already been covered. MSN's great. Woo, all right. But really, I just want to give you a status update on the MSN. And just talk a little bit about our suggestions going forward for members and excavators on how to utilize the system. So in 2017, in December precisely, we introduced map selection notification. And this took us from a street segment notification to a user-created map selection notification. And if I start with locate requests and the incoming locate requests that we have into the system, we're actually seeing an additional 15,000 plus locate requests that have come in between January and May of this year as compared to the same time in 2017. In terms of notifications, in 2016 and 2017, on average we were seeing approximately 7 to 8 members notified per locate request, depending on the month. And in 2018 we're seeing anywhere between 6 and just under 7 members notified for every locate request. And this is a provincial average. This calculates to approximately 257,000 notifications decreased, again between January and May 2018, as compared to the same time last year. And as you can see here in this bar graph, we were seeing a trend upwards in notifications year to year from 2015 to 2017, with a pretty good dip in 2018, thanks to MSN. And of course, this feature hasn't been without its challenges. One of the greatest challenges that we have faced, which has already been mentioned, but it is locate requests that are coming in through the phone. The primary reason these pose a challenge is because agents have to make a decision based on information provided to them from an excavator on exactly where an excavation will be occurring. And with limited field experience as compared to locators and excavators, it makes it challenging for them to make decisions. And as we know, assumptions will be made, sometimes miscommunications will happen, and at times we can't verify the information exactly in the system. So we've created some map selection rules for the agents, which help them get through the process. However, this means that our agents can't get the detail and the accuracy that an excavator could do if they were to create their own tickets in the web themselves. Another issue we face is the way that the information is actually coming into the system. Sometimes excavators will provide information that's not matching right map selection to the detailed description of the work they're providing, and we'd like to encourage anybody that's finding themselves struggling with the system, not being able to provide the accurate information for whatever reason, to please reach out to us at solutions@011call.com, as we're here to help. And finally, and although I don't see this as a challenge per se, more of a growing opportunity, members without defined mapping within our system don't get to benefit from the map selection notification, and therefore neither do the excavators who create the map selections. So some suggestions we have going forward for both members and excavators. For members, start with assess the risk. Review the mapping that you have internally and the documentation you have internally, and see if there's anything that you can provide us in short term that can help you start benefiting from map selection notification. In addition to that, check the options that we have within the system. For example, we have a hybrid solution where you could have both defined and undefined mapping coverages, and that depends on the confidence level in your maps internally, where your infrastructure is located, and the type of infrastructure that you have. To begin these conversations, please feel free to reach out to us at memberservices@011call.com. Okay. So helping you understand a little bit more about defined and undefined mapping coverages within our system, here I have a snippet of a real-life locate request. This is our base map in the back end of Ontario One Call system. You'll see the purple sort of outline, that's our map selection created on the web by an excavator. And you'll see a member with defined mapping, and you'll see a member with undefined mapping. The member with defined mapping avoided this notification. The member with defined mapping avoided the notification. The member with undefined mapping, of course, did not. And no matter how we drew this map selection, they would not avoid this notification. Taking that a little bit closer, you can actually see that this notification for the member with defined mapping came in within pixels. So the accuracy is pretty important. Another way to look at this would be statistically, these same two members of similar sized organizations, and they're providing the same service, have both seen an increase in notification between 2016 and 2017. Of course, the member with defined mapping has seen an actual dip in notifications in 2018, a pretty significant one. And again, this is just data from January to May. And the member with undefined mapping has actually seen pretty much a plateau, maybe a touch of a decrease there, but they're not seeing the greater benefits of map selection notification. Suggestions for excavators, and perhaps not the most popular, but decreasing your dependence on the phone. For those of you who do still put in your locate request through the phone, I understand that people need support. We understand that internally, and that's why we have great teams to help excavators in those departments. Our training and education team and our client services team are there for our excavators. However, as I've mentioned before, our agents don't have the same opportunity to create good map selections within our system because they don't always have all of the information they need, and we need to safeguard our members' infrastructure. So our map selections are there for that purpose. If you start providing more information on the web with clarity, with accuracy, matching the description of the work with your maps, providing your own sketches if you have them right into the web portal, you're going to see a much better locate request and therefore a much better locate at the other end. And finally, looking ahead. So in addition to what's already been mentioned by Bav earlier, we're also looking at creating a couple extra projects. One is a simplified web ticket for certain types of excavators and homeowners on certain types of property. And Bav actually did mention this already, but we're adding new tools to the map selection for specific types of work. for things like tree planting, boreholes, etc., that'll help our excavators make more accurate map selections within the system. And of course, this will all be wrapped into webinars and new training to help everybody get through the process. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Katie. So as mentioned earlier, we will have an open plenary session following these AGM proceedings to allow people to ask questions around our operations and some of the governance aspects of Ontario One Call. At this time, I'd like to ask if there's any other business that relates to the proceedings of this AGM. Seeing none, we will proceed to the formal adjournment. I'd like to thank everyone for their participation today. I would also like to thank the staff on Ontario One Call for organizing the event today. These things don't run smoothly without a little bit of thought. Shall we have a motion to declare that the 2018 Ontario One Call AGM be adjourned? Thank you, Michael. Second. Thank you, Enrico. All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, so we'll take about a 15-minute break, which gets us, let's call it 10:15, okay? It'll be 20 minutes. 10:15, and we'll come back and answer whatever questions you might have. Okay, thank you very much. We have Corey with the microphone, and nothing formal here. If you have a question or an idea or something you want to get off your mind, then just kindly raise your hand and Corey will come see you.
So we're just turning on the microphones here. So Corey has the mic. Feel free to ask any question you like. The only request we make is, to the best of your ability, make it as germane to the entire membership or to a larger group of stakeholders as possible, just so that the discussion can be of general interest to everyone here. If you have any specific concerns or questions, come talk to myself or Katie or some of the other One Call staff, and we're happy to talk to you one-on-one.
Hello. My name's Catherine Karn. I work for the City of Greater Sudbury. I was just wondering if, I know at one point there was something out there that the compliance department might be able to put out fines to members who are not giving locates within like the 5 business days. And I know that like as a member, I want people to come to me first and not go through compliance. And I know that's kind of what all of the members want. But I mean, there comes a certain point when like my operations committee or my operations division is not getting their locates and our LSP is like 200 locates behind. And I'm just wondering if we go to compliance with these complaints, if there's going to be any obligations from those members, or if the compliance department is going to be able to issue fines, because I am also going to be a part of those too, those non-compliant tickets. Like, are we going to get fined by the compliance department? Is the compliance department ever going to have teeth to fine us as a member not giving locates within 5 days, I guess?
I don't mind answering that question. So the act is quite clear. There is the powers to fine members. However, the board, we've discussed this on many occasions, and the philosophy that we want to go down is more of a, to facilitate members improving their compliance. One of the biggest things we're looking at is providing members transparency, and insights into their performance as compared to their peer group, as compared to the province. So we're rolling out those scorecards. The other issue is finding certain members would be a drop in the bucket in terms of their total damage prevention spend. We don't believe that would be much of a motivation to change behaviors. We believe that lasting and irreversible improvements to their approach to damage prevention is a much better way of going at it than simply fining on every occasion. Continues to be a vicious circle. I mean, the cost of compliance is, quite frankly, a cost that many members aren't willing to accept. And to staff up for that 8-week period where the bulk of the spike in volumes happen is A, quite costly, and B, in many cases, the skill sets and the people just aren't available. So there is that 8-week period roughly that many of the members get behind in those peak times, generally now. But I think it's better for the members, the LSPs, and the excavators to try and level that work volume out and work together to find solutions as opposed to fining. Now, the other thing that we considered is a fine to members. Certain members would certainly look at legal options and challenge that. And now we've got a situation, or we would have situations where now we're just in a legal fight, and we've forgotten why or what the main issue was, and that's to get locates done in a timely manner. Instead, we're fighting a legal battle. So let's take this offline because it's about you right now. But generally, what we're talking about is a compliance philosophy that is about solving the issue, less about fining, more about solving the issue. But we still have those powers, and we still are able to fine you if you want.
Good morning, Dan Smith from the City of Toronto. I do between 150 to 200 locates a year, sometimes more. The problem that I have with respect to parks is we have a civic address that sometimes could be what the space is between two houses to enter that park. However, the park could be several hundred acres in size. The locate companies have trouble trying to find where in the park exactly we may be excavating. So therefore, that requires a site meeting, and that could take up quite a bit of our time as well. I'm just wondering if there's some way we could look at creating a grid system within the parks, working with Ontario One Call to develop a process to identify, we'll say, certain quadrants of any given park using north, south, east, west sort of grid work. And the other thing is 30 days on some locates isn't enough. Is there some way we could extend that to at least be 45 days?
I'll deal with that question.
I think that would be in keeping with getting things done in a timely manner, thereby eliminating having to call for relocates and again re-site meetings and what have you. Because as we know through municipalities, things come up, projects get put behind and moved over on a daily basis. but I think it would still create a system where it would not necessarily invite abuse. So the two questions.
So in regards to the mapping information, we're always looking to improve our internal mapping, and we have a map within our web portal that we can also improve in certain ways. It does mean working with a third-party vendor, so that's something we can certainly look into and take, again, offline, just to see exactly what the parameters of that change would mean. However, today, if an excavator is going on the web, they can show more accurately where they are excavating on that map within that park, and then you can provide measurements within that map selection as well, and use the detailed description of the work to provide even more information in regards to where you're excavating. So there are some tools currently available for that, but we can certainly discuss more in terms of the mapping you're proposing.
In terms of the life of a locate, that's a policy set by each member. You know, I know several years ago, 30 days was pretty standard. As time has gone on, different members have tried different times. Some have moved to 60 days. Some have moved to the life of the project. So there has been some flexibility. At the same time, I know that there's other members who are opposed to going over 30 days. That doesn't mean you couldn't engage them in a discussion about why certain types of excavations or excavations in certain geographic areas like a park could be granted a validity date of greater than 30 days, but that's a discussion you'd have to pursue with the individual member.
Yeah, hi there. My name's Oliver. I'm with the City of Kawartha Lakes. I had, he just actually covered one of my questions. The other one was from the other side, because my staff provide the locate services. So I really hesitate to make a formal complaint against somebody that's asking for locates, and I'm wondering if there's any tools you guys have that could assist me in the sense that I've got a particular contractor who is putting in all of their locates for the whole season at the beginning of the year, and then going for relocate after relocate. And these are whole block locates. I only have 2 staff, and they're on relocate number 4, and no work has started. So we've tried talking to them, but they don't seem to be interested in, and I don't know whether it's a combination of the time it takes for them to get their locates from other service providers, and the fact that there are lots of multiple different time lengths from different providers. So some are putting 30 days, some are putting 60, some are making longer. Is there some way that we could collaborate and maybe sending a message to this person that this is just not really 100% acceptable, at least from my end?
Well, it's obviously completely unacceptable. The law states that when you put it on locate request, it's for work that should reasonably begin within 30 days. The phenomenon you describe is called ticket dumping. That's at least the phrase we use, and it's one that is, you know, unfortunately relatively common. So in those cases, please do call compliance. We do have a list of excavators who've abused that process. Sometimes it can be because of, you know, issues with other members not providing timely locates, but generally it's due to a lack of planning. And sometimes it's just ignorance of some of the tools that the one call system has, such as you can enter work but stagger your begin dates. So you can have the work start in an orderly fashion and roll out your requests in that orderly fashion. But there have been instances where we've canceled tickets because excavators have relocated tickets time and time again, and they haven't started the work, and there's no prospect of them starting the work. So how can we legally allow that request to move forward? So we've taken some pretty strong actions and had some very difficult discussions with excavators who've abused that. So definitely please do complain, because those are the types of things we want to nip in the bud.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Overbury. I work at Esri Canada, a GIS company. I have a question that relates perhaps to the gentleman at City of Toronto, and it's sticking with geography. Bav mentioned an upcoming initiative to include, I think, additional geographic coordinates in the ticket that comes through from on one call. I believe currently there's just a single XY coordinate that's in the middle of the area that's drawn on the map, and I'm just wondering what the initiative may include in the future. Was it going to include the entire linear area boundary of what's drawn on the map, or what might be included?
We're currently in discussions and in a discovery process for this feature. However, right now we're looking for all of the coordinates that are taking in the entire shape that an excavator creates on the web.
Great. Thank you very much.
Hi, Bruno Bellissimo, Timber Limited, sewer and water excavator. I have two questions. The first one I'm going to ask, then I'll ask my second one later. On page 11, this table on the bottom, can you explain it, what the reward and penalty arrows are on the bottom?
I think it's in the strategy doc.
This is the ABCD scale. Yep. So what Bruno's talking about is the letter grade scale on page 11, if you turn on your annual report. And that's basically a scale that gives like a school grade mark to locate performance. And what it describes is A-level performance is meeting 0 to 5 within 90 days. B is 80% within 0 to 5 days, and from there. So what it's basically measuring is the proportion of locates that's delivered within 5 days, and also sets limits for those that go beyond 5 days. You know, there's a big difference between a locate that's 1 day late and a locate that's 3 weeks late. So this lays down some guidelines about what a member should consider good performance and what a member should consider middling performance. If a member thinks that, well, we're getting most of the locates done within 5 days, and they look at this chart, they would see that they might not even qualify for a D grade. So that's why we put that grading system in there.
Okay, so are you looking at some sort of reward penalties scenario where good LSPs or good members are rewarded for their good behavior and bad ones vice versa?
I don't know if the board's talked about specific rewards. Certainly, we talked about the City of Sudbury. City of Sudbury is a very good locator in terms of the timeliness of locates. So at the very least, there's a lot of goodwill towards that member, expressed by other excavators. So I think the rewards may only be goodwill within the industry. In terms of penalties, those who struggle with locates go through a pretty difficult process with Ontario One Call. For the largest members and the largest station codes, we produce monthly reports that are sent out. We track those on a monthly basis. They're reported to the board. And those members who are struggling with compliance, they're given very specific direction to improve it. And thankfully, for the most part, they have really picked up the mantle to improve it. So, I'm looking around this room, I see a number of people with whom, we've had difficult discussions with, and I know that they've, changed locate service providers, that they've let go some of their old processes and gone through some difficult changes. So those who are not doing a good job are definitely confronted with that, and they have, by and large, taken big, big steps to improve.
Okay. My second question, I see what Ontario One Call has done with mapping and everything like that. I think it's great. However, I still think the board and general direction is a little bit misguided. I see here on page 7 and 8, you had in 2017 7 emergency abuses by excavators, and in the other comments 5, which I'm assuming that's the prerequisite locates where people are calling without permits. So what in your plan for 2018, you have web entry, emergency abuse, map improvement, cost management, developing of private single address, which is the prerequisites, implementation of MSN, and moving more excavators to web entry. So we're talking about 12 complaints that take up 2 of your bullet points, yet on page 7, you have 681 complaints on late locates and no bullet points on how you're going to address it. Furthermore, you're talking about clearing locates costs about $4 million, give or take. If the 681 locates are just 1 day late, that costs the crew $15,000. That's over $10 million for a 1 day delay. So if we're talking about as a whole, working as a whole to reduce costs to everybody, why are we not going after the large chunk of money which is being thrown down the drain by municipalities who are buyers of construction, by municipalities who are constructors as well, and we're going after the 12 complaints? Attack the 681.
So thanks, Bruno, for those remarks, and certainly, you're correct in describing the main body of complaints. The general gist of most complaints are, I've requested locates, I've played by the rules, these locates are late. For our part, you'll see that we put together the scorecard that tracks not mediocre performance, it tracks A-level performance, and it sets a standard of 75%. So the board is tracking to see who's delivering at the highest standard. So that's an important part of how the board tracks it. The other part as well is, we've had some success in dealing with things like ticket dumping and emergency locates. We've done a lot more to record late locate complaints, and one of the big phenomena that I talk about, with the ministry, they see more complaints, year over year, and I said that's a good thing, and we encourage those complaints, and it's nice to have a place that an excavator can call and complain and hopefully get some responsiveness and some action. Not that it always works out to the excavator's delight, but there's more work now being done on timely locates than there's been done before. I know from the number of complaints we received this year that, we receive, late locate complaints, but they tend to be geographically dispersed and dispersed amongst members. So we're really avoiding some of the hot spots that we'd see in previous years. There were previous years where the Peel area was very difficult for timely locates, where the Toronto area is very difficult for locates. A lot of those members have changed LSPs and changed their LSP models, and those have been eliminated as major sore points in terms of complaints. So there's still a lot more work to be done on timely locates. And as you say, the reason we have locates in a 5-day time frame for locates is so excavators can do the job safely. And that's really the end purpose, to protect infrastructure, because it's at risk of excavators, and we're worried about the excavators' safety and the excavators' timeliness in doing their work. So those are all important points and valid points to raise, Bruno.
Hi, I'm Kelly from PVS LSP. I had a question actually regarding your service level improvement that you're going to do. Again, it refers with ticket dump. We'll get excavators will call in 100, 200, 300 tickets, all with the same start date for doing tree planting, which is a struggle for the LSPs, because then we don't meet our compliance because they're not planting 500 trees by next Friday. So will this new service level project that you're doing will simplify that process for project jobs, for those kind of tickets, or is this something completely different?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to help the specific problem that you're describing. Jeff Hitchcock, who's here, he's worked with a lot of the forestry departments, because the challenge we were seeing is some municipalities would dump 5,000 locates. Exactly. Like, we're not talking about 100 or 200, we're talking about thousands of locate requests on the same day with the same start date.
Yeah, like for us, we have all these different areas all around the GTA, so we're looking at this municipality dumps 200, this 500, this forestry is 300 in every single municipality, and then their subcontractors dump another 100, 200, 300.
And so what we've done with those, the forestry departments, we spent a lot of time with them working on staggering their start dates. And we've had a lot of discussions with them too about, you need to reach out to the LSPs and the members to tell them what you're planning, because a lot of the tree planting people say in turn to us, we really plan on doing 500 trees in the next month, and these are the resources we've hired, and this is the number of crews we have. So we're definitely doing 500 trees within 30 days. And we tell them it's important that the members and the LSPs know that, because the LSPs might see that and think, well, they're just dumping tickets into the system, and maybe I shouldn't treat these seriously. But in reality, the tree planting company's done all the right things, and it's important to have that communication there so you can align expectations, and the forestry department will know what's going to be achieved in the time frame it's going to be achieved in. Yeah. And that's why it's important to communicate, because if the timely delivery of the locate is going to be a challenge, or maybe it should be staged in a different way, it's possible for the forestry department to perhaps stage their work. So with that type of communication, you're better able to really sort of align your expectations and help with the planning. And if you're able to do it beforehand, I know it usually comes at the start of spring in one giant move, but if you're able to talk to them a few months in advance, you can probably better align your expectations and their expectations and hopefully have a better outcome.
Yes, Andrew Stone with the Ontario Sewer Water Main Construction Association. I'm just curious, is part of your bylaws, is Schedule 4 still around, or has that changed?
As far as I know, it's still around.
I was just looking on your website and I couldn't find it. I don't know if you guys can maybe update it, or again.
Happy to update it. We updated our website mostly to fix and improve the back-end features. It wasn't a really stable platform before, but we still have a lot of work to do in terms of making it a really effective and easy-to-use portal for people who want to look at the bylaws, people who want to learn more about our policies, people who want to file a complaint. It's still pretty basic at that level, so there's still a lot more work to do.
Hi, Scott from R&B Locating. We're a private locate company, but we also help facilitate companies that want us to do their public work for them. Just through the one-call system. One of the things I've tried in the past, and to hit on Kelly's point, is give a later ticket date. And I've put a ticket, dig date a month and a half down the road and received a 30-day locate within 5 days. Or a 30-day expiring locate in 5 days, which isn't even going to be valid by the ticket date. Is there anything in place to let the LSPs know not to do a ticket? This is more January off-season kind of things, but then I have to do another ticket just to make a valid locate by the time the dig date comes around. And then to hit on dig dates again, on the relocates, what are the current rules in place for when a ticket is still valid, like a locate is still valid? And is there any way to override that? Because you can get into a vicious cycle of now all of a sudden you have a 2-day dig window between the one that was still valid and then the one that's being expiring.
So for the purposes of the relocate timeframes are actually managed by the members themselves in the expiry timeframe of each locate request. So if you request a locate from Ontario One Call, our system will potentially generate a relocate if requested 25 days after the original date. However, members might have different expiry dates for their locates period. So if another member has, let's say, a 45-day life of a locate request, then they will give you locates at a different time for the relocate. And it also plays into effect that if different members complete their locates at different times, their expiry might also be pushed out by a couple of days on the longer end. So when you call in for a relocate, that ticket isn't yet expired for one member, but it's expired for another member. So it gets very complicated in that respect. And a lot of it isn't managed, unfortunately, in the Ontario One Call system. It's with the actual locators or the members themselves making those rules. We try the best we can to facilitate what we call a relocate delay. If specific members have longer lifetimes of their locates, say 60 days, 90 days, etc., we try to not send them that notification so that they don't have to, the excavator doesn't have to wait for that relocate. They know right away that it's still valid, and the member doesn't have to go and roll a truck on that one.
Just my follow-up question on the relocate was, if I see a locate is still valid and I know that it's still valid this week, it's not going to be valid in a week and a half, 2 weeks by the time I get the rest of the locates in, is there a way for me to, do I have to call in to override that to say, well, no, although this is valid, I need them to be notified? Because
well, that's where the tricky part comes in with different members having different validity time frames. It's really hard for us to tell you, wait until the most far out locate request expires, because then you're probably starting or continuing to dig without certain locates being valid based from different members. So it is a very tricky scenario for us. We deal with it every day and trying to explain how it works, and because we have so many different members in the system doing it differently, that's where the issues come in. And most typically we let the excavators know to not call us until about 5 days before that 30-day period from when they originally submitted that locate request. But again, it might differ based on when you received the locates from each member, etc. So it does become a little bit challenging on that end, and we do feel the pain of that process sometimes. So, but if you'd like more conversation about this, please reach out to us at member services at on1call.com, because we can get a little bit more in depth, and maybe specific members, if you have specific member not issues, but questions about their relocate timeframes, et cetera, we can help a little bit more maybe there. Okay.
Katie, to add on to that, do you still have the long-term suspend option?
Yes.
So if you're going to put in, X amount of tickets, to your point, that they're going to start 2 months out, you put it in as 2 months out and the system releases it automatically. Is that still how it works?
Yes, we do. And for that, the first part of your question, I would say that in respect to that issue that you identified, it may have been a glitch in the system or something like that, and we do encourage you to send those types of issues into our solutions department or even member services, as we do have a long-term suspend feature where if you put in a locate request with a work to begin date that's farther out, 10 days or more out, then it typically goes into what we call, as Tab mentioned, a long-term suspend. And the ticket won't be released until 10 days before the locate work to begin date is set. So again, it might have been a glitch, might have been something that happened. So I do ask you to reach out and let us know. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know the particular situation, but it sounds like potentially it was just a glitch in the system, so feel free to reach out to us.
Hi, Brian Brennan, Hydro Telecom. Can you sort of elaborate on that quickly at that relocate delay, what that actually means? Because one of the issues we're having, we have 60 days, and a requester may call in and actually ask for a relocate twice, so basically extending the validity of another asset owner that exceeds our 60-day. So in other words, they could actually be starting their excavation maybe on the 72nd day, but meaning that the validity of some of their asset owners is fine, but ours is actually expired because of that 60-day. Do you know what I mean?
Understand. Yeah. I think that's something that we would have to look into more in depth with our member services department. That sounds very specific to a situation that you might be experiencing. Again, it depends on when people put in their locate requests and when they receive the actual locates on the ground or the paperwork from the member. Again, if it's one member does it in the first or second day, another does it by the 5th day, you're extending almost by a business week that request. And when someone calls in to relocate because they think it's about to expire, one member's might be expiring and other members might not. So I think in terms of getting more to the grassroots here, we'd have to explore that a little bit more.
So those are automatically suppressed then, right?
For a relocate delay? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, my question is that the MSN has resulted in reduced notifications. So should we expect to see a drop in the fee structure next year proportionately?
So as we saw in the presentation, the assessment this year is $8.4 million, and that's shared by the membership. It's the same amount as last year in 2017. So if the board holds the line on that $8.4 million, the size of the pie might stay the same. It's just going to be a question of how it's divvied up amongst the membership. So come the end of Q2 in July, you'll see a report for the TTC, and each individual member will get their report, and you'll be able to see if you're better than average in terms of reducing your notifications or worse than average. So if you're at a 15% reduction and the overall reduction province-wide is 10.9%, your overall payments in the system should go down slightly. If you are down 8%, and like the last example was, if you go down 8%, but the average member is down 10%, your share of the pie will go up microscopically. I don't think there's going to be a big change or fluctuations in what a member pays into the system. I think that the overall size of the pie will remain about the same. If there's an increase, it would have to go to the membership for a vote. So based on the reports you'll receive in Q2 and Q3, you'll be able to see if your overall payments for 2019 are going to edge up or edge downwards.
So what is the benefit for us for the reduction in the notifications? How is that just in terms of effort?
So in terms of where people save money in MSN,
yes,
they're not going to save a lot of money based on reducing their one-call payments, because the members fund that, and there'll be changes amongst the membership relative to each other. But for the most part, all members are getting fewer notifications. So there's not going to be any huge changes in terms of everyone's share of the pie. Where members save money is in their own organization, in their back office. Because this year they will receive 1 million fewer notifications than they would last year. And previously they would, at the very least, had to have taken these million notifications and cleared them through some back office process. So it might be done in-house, it might be outsourced, and it might cost anywhere from $4 to $16. So within Ontario One Call, or 8.4 million, you may not be saving much money there, but when it comes to your own back office, that's where the savings are. It's because you're not getting those notifications anymore, and you don't have to go to the bother and the cost of dealing with them and clearing them, hopefully.
Candida from Branco Construction. So just kind of touching base on late locates, I feel like I've been talking to Sarah from compliance for, I don't know, since the beginning of the season. What exactly do you guys do when I file a complaint, let's say? Because I mean, I think I've filed, what, like 5 complaints with different areas, and I'm still getting late locates, and I think I'm at 10 days right now being late. So not really penalizing the LSPs when these companies are going to start losing money because we can't start on certain days. You know, we have city work that they have to start on that specific day. We don't, we lose money. What happens then? Like you guys say you have, you know, specific direction to the LSPs on, you know, when you file complaints. What exactly is that? And how is that going to benefit getting our locates any earlier? Because me complaining doesn't get me my locates any earlier.
Well, you know, there's a couple things that happen when you put a complaint in. And first off, we encourage people to complain, which sounds like an odd thing to say, but we want to get feedback from members and excavators about what's not working, and we want to track and understand those things. When we get a call about a late locate, there's sort of 2 things that happen. First, we deal with it as a specific complaint. So you might be missing a locate for X project in X location from X member. And we'd reach out to that member and, you know, inform them of the complaint, and they'd be responsible for responding to that complaint and dealing with that situation as a one-off. At the same time, too, we also track these things at a macro level. So you might have a member who's a chronic problem with timely locates. You might have a member who's usually quite good and just happens to have a late locate for one of 100 different reasons that could make a locate late. So when you make those complaints, we also look at their macro record as well. And in some cases where they don't have a satisfactory record and they're not doing well on that A to D scale we talked about earlier, they're likely to get more communications from compliance. They're likely to be compelled to go to meetings with compliance. And at the end of the day, they're going to have to confront their performance and improve it. But One Call will make sure they get all the tools and develop all the understandings needed to do that. One of the challenges is that, you know, with 1 million requests and last year 7 million notifications, it's very difficult to, you know, excavators face a very difficult job in the field. And a lot of their work is time sensitive, and they're the ones who really bear a lot of costs. For the LSPs, for their part, they struggle because the demand is not even. It's very susceptible to seasonal changes, which they can predict, but also month-to-month changes, which are very difficult to predict. For our part, at Ontario One Call, our volumes for January, February, March, April were exactly the same as they were last year, and then suddenly they went up 10% in May. And LSPs are very affected in their delivery when they see such sudden changes because they come in large bubbles. I know in our call center, for those who call into the call center, you know, you call in Monday morning in May or June, there's likely to be a wait because there's such an increase in influx of volume during those periods. We would actually need to knock down the wall of the unit next to us and double our staff to deal with those calls within the 20-second time frame that we have. So there's always going to be that pressure in the start of the construction season and during its peak. And there is going to be some bend in the system, but we certainly work with the members to ensure that the system doesn't break and you don't have real chronic problems. And there have been previous years where there have been chronic problems and chronic LSPs and chronic members who have provided many months of ongoing problems. And thankfully, we've gotten away from that by and large.
I think that's a valid, I don't want to call it excuse, or it's a reason, valid reason as to why some locates are late now. So if they're late in 2012, and late in 2013, and 14, 15, 16, 17, still haven't got it under control. You can't blame it now on the sudden influx in construction work. You weren't good last year, you weren't good the year before, not you specifically, but we weren't good last year, we weren't good the year before. So you can't say that now, because there's 10% more calls in May, oh, that's why we have 8 locates. No, sorry, I disagree, unilaterally.
And I'm not going to disagree with that. I know what I hear from the members. You know, the members are susceptible to, you know, we've talked about the pressures in terms of the timeliness, you know, some of the bulges of work that come through. You know, when I talk to members, I'll tell you what I hear from them, and I'm not necessarily saying these are good reasons or good explanations. You know, a lot of the members who do it in-house face constraints with staffing. Oftentimes it can be very small changes, you know, a staff departure, an administrative change, a retirement. There can be sometimes really small things that shouldn't affect something as important as delivering locates, but it does. And you know, I think that's one reason we've seen a lot of members move to LSPs is because, you know, if you outsource that, the LSPs will handle all that, but those still doing it in-house are still very susceptible to very minor changes, which is unfortunate because the excavator is the one holding all the financial risk, and they're the ones who are losing out because of these, what should not be significant changes.
Personal financial risk, not financial risk to an institution, it's personal financial risk.
Yeah.
I think like 80% of contractors are small to medium businesses in the province of Ontario. That's 80% of the contractors working are personally liable for the contracts they sign, and based on the fact that they're getting locates within 5 days.
So I'll give you some good news or a good example. I was asked to attend City of Mississauga Council maybe a month or two ago, and I go and I actually know some of the councillors. I'm like, okay, I'll be interested to hear what they say, and pretty much every discussion I've had with municipalities up to that point was the system is too strict. 5 days is too strict. It should be 10 days or 15 days or 2 weeks, and why you're making this so hard for me, and it's costing us more money, and we're getting all these more requests. It was a tale of woe. But this was the first meeting I went to where the City of Mississauga, just in this case, was saying, our contractors come to us and saying, they're delayed because not getting locates. So it was the first time I heard a municipality view it through the eyes of the excavator, and of course they're the ones paying the excavators to do sewer and road work, and not view it from the perspective of them as a member. And I thought that was a major change where a member wasn't thinking of themselves and their own delivery responsibility, and they had done a lot of work to improve and address some of their challenges, but now we're looking at themselves as an excavator or the client of excavators. So it was interesting to see a member make that change, philosophically, and I thought that was a very positive thing.
Greg from Roto-Rooter. Last year when I was here, my concern was the locate times, and quite honestly, they're a heck of a lot better, which is great, and I thank you. Most of our locates are being performed within 24 hours. But we do run into the situation sometimes, and it's happened about 3 or 4 times in the last 6 months, where we've been the first call to a house and we've put in a locate request and haven't had a response within 24 hours. We've called Ontario One Call. They are receptive to try and put a rush on it for us. But, being in the private sector, our home with Mrs. Jones in Effluent in her basement, she's in the situation where she naturally wants instant gratification, so she's enlisted the help of another company. And that company may come out, within 24 hours of us being there, and they call Ontario One Call, and they've already got the locates within 24 hours, and we're sitting at the 24, 36-hour mark, so we've lost the job. Now, vis-a-vis, we've also been the second call in situations where contractor A couldn't take care of the client, and we've made the phone call, and we've had the locates within 24 hours and been granted the job. So in your system, 222 Jones Street, I know you'll have multiple locates perhaps for electrical, if you have an electrical contractor, a gas contractor, a drain contractor. Can you see that 2 companies have in fact called for the same purpose, being a drain contractor? And if so, what's the protocol there?
So our system, they might have the same municipal address, but we wouldn't necessarily, unless you checked the address and the type of work, and if there was a description of it, that's the only way you could determine if it was 2 people trying to do the same work. We might have we might have multiple locate requests if someone was putting in a fence and then someone else was putting in a pool. So nothing in the system really triggers that there's sort of 2 people trying to do the same thing at the same property. Yeah, at the same time too, if we see that there's 2 contractors trying to do the same thing at the same address, and that member just gets, those members get notified, it's not really easy for us to sort of police who's doing what, or did someone make a duplicate request, or is, we're not really sure what exactly is happening with those 2 excavators or what that interaction is. So it just gets passed on to the members just as a normal request would. The members themselves or their LSPs might see, well, here's 2 tickets for the same property. I just located it for one of them. So all I need to do for the other is just send them the paper records.
Probably not going to turn back to the contract.
Yeah.
I'm being very finite with what I'm picking on.
Yeah.
But it is a concern.
Yeah, and you're talking about those, the P0 requests. So we've really tried to develop the P0 requests. Usually it was really, or in the past years, it was very binary. It was either emergency or 5 days. And there was a very high standard for emergency. It was response within 2 hours. And it was life-threatening scenarios, and it was pretty drastic stuff. But there was really a large cohort of work that you talked about, where there's sewer in the basement and the owner of the house isn't happy. That's not a drop everything, life is at risk to our emergency, but any normal person would say this needs to be done within 12 hours or 24 hours, and you need to respond to it in a way that's much more expedient than 5 days. By and large, the members have done a good job policing that themselves. We haven't got a lot of complaints about that, which I've been very happy with. It's an example of members being very responsive to excavators when they put in their requests. But there is that challenge there that it's same with emergencies. It's always the weakest link that you have to rely on. And if you're missing a locate, you're stuck. And there are some people out there who may not be as observant of the law and might suggest to a customer that they can dig with what they have already without the paper records, and that's a concern as well. So ideally, the members responding timely should eliminate that problem, and the first person to get the job should be fine getting locates, but again, that's the type of thing where you really rely on your relationship with a member to ensure that process happens smoothly.
Barbara Mahon, Hydro and Telecom. I have few points that I would like to address that may be improved. First, we do very detailed screening in the house before we send locate to locator. So I noticed that the map attached and that is done by Ontario One Call, it's only more confusing than help. It's sometimes happens that this location is absolutely out of the really like the excavator area. Also, you know, to look at this map, then to find out this is done by Ontario One Call takes more time. So I don't know if other people share, but from our experience, it's waste of time, okay? So maybe, like for me, it's a rather like screen this detail without that map because it's very often more confusing. Second point is lately we receive phone calls from customers asking about status of locate, and I found out that they were never sent to us. There is notification sent when I go to Ontario One Call website, but we never receive those locates. So I have to ask the customer to send out the locate and to process. So, which is always overdue. Another point is 360 update. It takes unbelievable time to update. It should be very, very simple. You have to go to 3 screens over there to update this 360, what is the status of locate, then you have to go back to type another ticket number, and again the same story. It should be 1 screen, update, status, that's it. So maybe that could be improved. And another, we also receive phone calls from customer about the asking for status of locate. When I go and check, the locate was cleared by Ontario One Call. They tell me, listen, we already called, they told us to call you. So it happens quite very often. I don't know why immediately without checking, they inform the customer, call company. And the last point, it's about difference between relocate and that sometimes I notice that excavator companies are confused about what is the difference between, and sometimes I get phone calls about we don't want marks in the field, we want relocate, but we don't want relocate, we want on the new date, we know where you have fiber, and so there is some little bit confusion about remarks and relocate.
So let's start with the first one. So map selections created by agents, as I mentioned earlier, will always be larger, and because we can't always verify the exact dig location information provided by the excavator, they have to make the best judgment call. And like I said, we do have rules that will take in a larger area. Now, that said, if there's something that seems really odd, like the dig street isn't right or something like that in the map selection created by an agent, we do encourage members and even excavators to provide that information to us at our solutions at on1call.com email or member services at on1call.com to help us get through that and provide the coaching necessary for agents. In regards to, you're going to have to walk me through all of your questions, I think, but
too many maps. I'd go through 3 maps or 3 screens.
But that was for the last one. So let's work with your second. I'm sorry?
So another point that notification sent to the company, but we never received. Is this happening because of the new people working or something like?
So that might be a system issue. So it has nothing to do with our agents. We have a very specific process where they click through screens to get a notification generated for members. So if you are experiencing that, we do really want to hear about that. It could have a plethora of different situations. Perhaps the contact information we have is wrong. Any real number of things could be an issue there. So please do let us know at Member Services when you're experiencing these issues so that we can look into it.
The tickets that are cleared by Ontario One Call, but when customer calls, he's told to call company. Why it's happening like that?
It would be dependent on the situation that you're describing. I'm not sure if it's in terms of them looking for a status on a locate. I'm not sure what the situation exactly is, that we would give them the information to call the member directly. Most typically it's because they're looking for a status update and they're not seeing one. So it could be related to if you're not receiving the notification for some reason and they're not seeing any feedback. But again, I would say for that to send us the examples of the tickets you haven't received and the ones where the excavator was directed to give you a call, because what we can do is always review our calls internally and see what the situation was.
Okay, and the last one, 360 update.
Okay, so
if that could be improved.
In terms of, I think systematically, which is what I can speak to, systematically we're always welcoming feedback in terms of improving the system. So if you do have some feedback in terms of how you think we could get through the process easier, we welcome that. The system is designed the way it is per ticket right now so that the members are providing information into the system per ticket, like I said. There are ways to automate that process, which we also can discuss with you if you're interested in that. And it depends on if you're willing to and are able to create a system on your end that can feed into our system. And then that way you can, even when you're responding even per ticket, the system's doing it automatically for you. So there are some options right now, but in regards to how the interface looks or works, we welcome feedback directly from the web portal. So.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm Martin from Brantco Construction. You've already dwelled on the subject regarding late locates. But in quite a few of our contracts, we have penalty clauses in them, and we have bonds through bonding companies in place. So when we don't get the locates on time, we can pay a penalty like $1,000 a day. So what's our protection in that situation?
Well, that's the exact reason City of Mississauga called me to speak to their council about it, which was people are in your shoes and they're suffering penalties or risk losing contracts because they don't have the locates in hand, and the city was not satisfied with that outcome. So they were very clear with me that excavators can be held accountable for things that they control, but the timeliness of locates is not one of those things they control. So that was the message that the City of Mississauga passed on to us. Certainly you can work with us on specific complaints, but it's also important to have a relationship too with the member and with the LSP. Ontario One Call can chase individual problems kind of after the fact, but in terms of them being responsive to a specific issue or a specific concern, that's the type of thing where knowing the LSP and knowing the member is probably the optimal situation. And there's really nothing Ontario One Call can do in terms of penalties or fines that would really change the importance of that.
So what's our defense in that situation?
It's the contracts. It's also the fact that, you can look to the member and, point to them as the cause of it. Mississauga indicates that municipalities are starting to understand that municipalities, understand that locates can be late, and these are things not in the excavator's control, and that's probably an important part to communicate when you're dealing with the municipalities providing contracts, which is, you know, we control some things, we can control the availability of our crews, but we have to be mindful too that we're also reliant on the members of Ontario One Call, which includes the municipality themselves, to provide timely locates. And it's good to see municipalities starting to understand that and to link that together.
Okay, on some of the private contracts, we still have penalty clauses, and they don't really care. So I get the municipality portion of the program, but like some of even the regional governments that we work for, and the MTO and everything, they have performance reviews, and that all reflects on future opportunities. So, like, I don't know when something's really late, like if it gets to 10 days, what's our legal recourse?
I can't really speak to the legal recourse. I know at One Call, you know, at the micro level, when you have a specific concern, you know, we'll chase down the member and the LSP and deal with that locate. But in terms of the impacts it has on you, you know, you also have a relationship with the person giving the contract, with that member, with that LSP. So unfortunately, we can only be part of the solution. And certainly we've done a lot to help members who've gone through big fundamental changes, but you know, even in the best case scenarios, providing locates is a challenging job. But the reason the picture on the front cover of the annual report is one I took near where I live in Toronto, and we used it because it really shows the complexity and the challenge, not only of what the excavator has to face. You look at that and think, where would they put any infrastructure? But you know, even the locator, you know, the job of locating is getting tougher with time. The roads are more congested. You know, especially the LSPs, they might be servicing more clients, so there's more diversity of infrastructure they have to locate. And some of that infrastructure isn't intrinsically locatable, and the records are sometimes challenging to produce the locates. So the locators themselves in the field face a lot of challenging situations too. But I think any excavator, you know, they'll benefit from a strong relationship with the members and the LSPs that are local. And if they can develop a relationship, one that's responsive to their needs and they can call when they really need to, that's probably the most beneficial thing to develop.
Okay, and back to the relocates. We're on projects sometimes that last 2 months. We're the only one there working, got it fenced in, and the locates are expiring. We had to get them relocated. I was just wondering, I know you have no say in it, but is there any way you could put pressure on them to extend the limits of those? Because that would save a lot of money for everybody, I think.
Yeah, certainly Bav from the Operations Committee, and the Operations Committee's discussed that a lot. You know, they discuss what constitutes a project and how should members serve a project differently, whether it's, they usually think in terms of a length, but there's also work that sewer and water would do, which is usually a confined site, specific excavation, and lots of work within that excavation, but not necessarily a changing footprint. So that's the type of thing that the Operations Committee can look at, which is what happens if you have a fixed, basically a fixed hole for a long period of time, and what can members do to facilitate construction, as opposed to having locates expire with every 30 days and having to ask the excavator to deal with that. We'll take one last question in the back here. We're coming up to about 1 hour of the session, and it's a good time to wrap it up here.
It's Nancy Davidson, City of Guelph. I just have a question about the map selection notification. We haven't seen a reduction in number of tickets whatsoever, actually an increase. But I have noticed if we're on a cul-de-sac, the operator puts in, say it's for one ABC lane, we'll get notification requesting the entire cul-de-sac to be done instead of just for that specific home. So I'm just wondering, I called in about it and they said, well, there's a 20-meter buffer on either side and that's why. But if you know it's for a specific resident, Why aren't we just selecting that home?
So that comes to being able to validate the information in our system. We use a couple of additional resources to be able to find if there's a specific civic address. And if the agent can't find those within a GIS map and another internal map we use, then they can't accurately or confidently make a decision about which lot exactly to choose from an aerial image. And when that occurs, they have other rules they follow, which is typically to take in more of the street to be able to ensure that we safeguard any infrastructure under the ground there and not create a situation where we've under-notified a member, which is far worse than adding an additional notification. We're obviously looking at safety, we're looking at damages, so that's predominantly why that may occur, but we're happy to review any additional tickets that you might have that don't really seem quite right, and we can go into detail as exactly what happened in the event that, you know, an agent could have been coached in a situation, because they are just individuals and they have some fears in creating these map selections because they know what's at stake.
And I know I looked up Guelph a couple days ago and I noticed they were higher, and it really stood out to me. So if it's higher to such an extent, it's probably not just a couple individual cases. So it's probably an interaction of the mapping with our system and how that works. So there's probably a very useful and fruitful discussion we can have to sort of see how we can address that.
Okay. My second question is, we've been receiving a lot of locate requests for digs on private property, so someone's backyard or whatever, and the contractor, well, the map is including city infrastructure, but our infrastructure is nowhere near where they're going to be excavating, but they simply want to know where the infrastructure is. So they're not actually excavating where they say they're going to be, they just want to know where our infrastructure is. So how do we deal with that?
So generally, what we consider that to be is an abuse of the system at the end of the day. We do have an option for a planning and design request, so if someone's just looking for information in terms of what's in the area, but they're not looking to actually locate, that is the best way for them to receive that information. Now, the sort of downfall with that is that not all members participate in providing information to excavators about where infrastructure is under a planning and design request. And I think that that sort of puts into a cycle why some excavators may choose to submit a locate request rather than a planning request. If you do see those instances occurring, again, flag it for us. As Ben mentioned before, as with a lot of locates coming into the system that may or may not be reasonable in terms of their number, we would look at this as well as an abuse of the system and determine whether or not it was actually poorly put into the system.
So who would we contact? Like what department? Sorry.
So with that one, from a member's perspective, the best is for member services. So that's memberservices@on1call.com.
I just have one last question about invoicing. So we're charged per phone call, right? For emergency phone calls we receive. If we have more than one station code, we're charged per station code, is that correct? Instead of the one phone call they make?
Correct.
It's charged per phone out, but if you're asking us to charge it or to phone out to more than one person for a different type of infrastructure,
nope,
that's where
we receive one phone call. Our locators perform locates for water, sewer, drainage, traffic, fiber. We receive one phone call, but if there's water and fiber and traffic in there, they're under 3 different station codes, we get charged 3 times for the same one phone call.
For the dispatch. Okay, well, we will look into that internally.
I did email,
okay.
but that was the response I got. It's because of the station
Okay.
codes. But you're only placing one phone call. So it should only be charged for one.
We'd have to look into that a little bit more. In the sense we do charge, well, we don't even charge per notification anymore. So that's when you would get charged for every type of medium you have in the system. So let us take that back.
And one concept too that's similar to that. With the current system, we charge by notification. Just now that it's how we divvy up the pie instead of paying $1.10 or whatever price per notification. A number of members have come to us and said, well, to reduce what we paid into Ontario One Call, we've reduced the number of, I guess what you might call, multiple notifications we received. So if you had a system set up where your LSP received a notification and someone in your field office received a notification and someone in your head office received a notification, you'd receive 3 charges for 3 different tickets at full price. And with the assessment-based model, it kind of eliminates any kind of incentive or basis for us to do that. So we could look at what are the real costs of sending duplicate notifications, because they're not the full price, they're just the marginal cost of sending that over the internet. So it's a really modest cost. So there might be the possibility for us to review the opportunity for members to receive multiple copies of notifications at a greatly reduced or token rate, essentially. So that's something we're interested in looking at as well. Because there have been some members who've turned that off to reduce fees and didn't really want to do it. So that's an area where we might be able to offer an augmented service to members without any real additional cost.
Thanks.
So thank you for your time and thank you for all your questions. There's a number of staff here and we're going to be milling around, so feel free to come say hi with any issues you might have. And you can also reach out to us by phone and email, and if you're ever driving past Guelph, we're just right across from the Sleeman's plant. So do feel free to drop in anytime.